This morning when I got up, a buddy of mine gave me a late Christmas gift. Santa Claus must have forgot this one in the bag, but he sent it to me. It was a clip from Madam Web, a clip that I had already scrubbed from my memory. It's where she's edging a Pepsi can for like 5 scenes in a row. So she's like fidgeting with it, she's caressing it, fondling it, playing with the tab on it, and never actually opens it. And this goes on for like 2.5 minutes or something like that, where many scenes back to back to back, she just has this Pepsi can, and she's just like she's doing a fucking secret handshake with it. Narratively, the reason she's doing that is because she wanted a beer. So the natural human reaction to not getting a beer and getting a Pepsi instead is to then start groping your Pepsi can for 2.5 minutes like an absolute lunatic. And it reminded me not only of how horrible Madam Web is, but also how we got to this point, with Sony Pictures CEO Tony Vinciquerra just being a delusional imbecile. A few days ago, he came out to publicly defend and deflect for the Sony lack of Spider-Man Spider-Verse, where they produced these films for Spider-Man villains that took them and made them into basically what ChatGPT thinks heroes are. And these films have not been received well. It's been flopping more than when I take my cock out of my shorts to tinkle. It has been nothing but embarrassing movies that they have produced. And Tony Vinciquerra can't wrap his head around why they're not performing well. And it just showcases that the leadership at these massive companies is so out of touch that it's sickening. The reason they're not performing well should be obvious. Because the movies are bad, and it's things nobody wants. Even conceptually, this formula that they tried to cook up here is just dog shit. It's a recipe nobody wants to eat. You're taking Spider-Man villains, hold the Spider-Man, and turning them into heroes. Not even anti-heroes, but in the lamest possible way, like CW-level hero slop. It makes no sense. I don't know who it's for. Out of all of the Sony lack of Spider-Man Spider-Verse, the only ones that have at least done decently in the box office are the Venom films. And it's not like they're amazing movies, but they're significantly more entertaining than the others that they've pumped out. The Morbius, the Kraven, the Madam Web, all that. Like, Venom has worked to a certain extent because it's at least silly fun, at bare minimum. The others are a tedious chore to sit through. It's more stimulating to listen to a lecture on ATP in an anatomy and physiology course than it is to go see a Sony lack of Spider-Man Spider-Verse film. And Tony Vinciquerra is just deflecting. He can't understand why they're not doing well because he doesn't think they're terrible movies, and he blames the press for it. Highlighting the box office disasters this year for them with Madam Web and Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter in particular has underperformed beyond your wildest possible expectations of what underperforming could even look like. Whatever you thought was possible for dog shit in the box office, Kraven the Hunter has exceeded. And Tony, he knows that. He described Kraven as the worst launch that Sony has had since starting its Marvel franchise. And then also added, so that didn't work out very well, which I still don't understand because the film is not a bad film. Tony, come back to reality, man. Not only is it a bad film, but no one wanted to see it in the first place because it is a company that has a reputation for pumping out bad movies in this genre. And it's also a movie about a Spider-Man villain that doesn't have Spider-Man in it, so why are people going to go watch the villain be the hero? It doesn't... Who is this for, Tony? It's not for you because you're not watching it. I know you haven't seen this movie, Tony. Don't you ever lie to me again. Don't you ever tell fibs. Liars go to hell, Tony. So stop it. Cut it out. You haven't seen this movie, because if you did, you would know exactly why it hasn't done well. It's a bad movie. It also didn't help that the director of Kraven had to come out and publicly beg people to give the movie a chance. That is so sad, like begging people to show up to your birthday party. The director's saying people have got to give us a chance and come out and support this film and literally try to wash away some of the other stuff that's happened. Give our film a chance. Even acknowledging shortcomings in this fucking lack of Spider-Man verse. And anyone who was suckered into this by the director pulling on their heartstrings, well, you know what they got rewarded with? A bad movie! Kraven sucks! It's not good. Anyone who went to see it wasted their money and time with seeing it. It's better than Madam Web, though, but that's the lowest possible bar you could ever set for something. And Tony actually had some very interesting words about Madam Web. Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film and it did great on Netflix. For some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us making these films out of Kraven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. Tony, Madam Web is a pile of shit with fart on top. I don't expect him to come out here and be like, look, we know this is trash. We know the movie's trash. I don't expect him to do that. But he could at least have some dignity here and throw away the delusion for a second and be like, oh, these movies underperformed and we need to take a step back and understand that maybe we weren't delivering the quality that fans would expect from these properties. Like, that's a classy way of handling it, as opposed to just saying, it's all the press's fault. The press, for some reason, just had it really out for Madam Web and Kraven. We created masterpieces, but the press, they crucified it. No, man. People with eyes crucified it. It sucks. You didn't watch Madam Web. I know you didn't watch it, Tony. Because if you did, you would know what everybody who was subjected to this torture knows. It's boring, and it is a movie where, like, actually nothing happens. It's terrible. It became a huge meme because of just how terrible it is. Oh, man, that was the guy that was with my mother when they were researching spiders right before she died. Like, that became a huge meme. It's bad in every possible department a movie can be bad in. The action, for how little there is in here, there's like 2 scenes of action, is horrible, where like the ambulance crashes through that building at one point, and it's going to miss the main villain. I don't even remember who the villain is. I don't remember his name or anything about him. I just remember this scene where the ambulance is crashing through a building, it's going to miss him, so the villain jumps in front of the ambulance so it'll hit him. Every part of this movie doesn't work. That is why Madam Web didn't do well. Not because the press had it out for Madam Web for some reason. It's just not a good movie. Tony just loves passing the blame and has the convenient excuse of the critics and the press. They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. These are not terrible films, they were just destroyed by the critics and the press for some reason. Now, there has never been a time in history where people have less faith in critics than now. So I promise you, it doesn't matter what the critics are saying, it's not really going to change how people feel when they leave a movie. In fact, a lot of times, people will go see a film in spite of how much they distrust the journalists that cover it. This is not an excuse that works. Like, I fucking can't stand, like, IGN, for example. But if IGN said Venom was the worst movie ever made and I go see it and I like it, I'm not going to let that IGN review change the way I felt about the movie. This is a stupid scapegoat that you're trying here, Tony. Now, of course, I do still believe that sometimes reviews, if they're just overwhelmingly negative, will scare some people away from seeing it, and those people will be more reserved and wait to see what others say. But I think in cases of like a superhero movie, the people that are planning to see it are the same ones that are probably going to already distrust the critics and the press and what they say about a film. The big thing is no one wanted to go see these because they're not interested in seeing them, and they already knew that they were likely going to be bad. Completely regardless of what the press was already saying about it. Now, in the case of Venom, Venom is also not an amazing movie. There is not an amazing movie in the Venom trilogy, but that trilogy is at least fun. There's action, there's charm, there's comedy that works from time to time. So those movies are entertaining to watch. Kraven, Madam Web, Morbius, those movies are a slog. They are a chore to sit through. It's a punishment if you have to watch one of those. Like, it's not comparable. It seems like they're finally throwing in the towel for this strategy that just has not been working at all, saying, I do think we need to rethink it just because it's snake-bitten. If we put another one out, it's going to get destroyed no matter how good or bad it is. Again, that's just cope. You haven't made a good one yet. Like, that's the problem. Tony just being all pathetic about it and pouting. You know, even if we made a masterpiece, everyone's just gonna call it stinky anyway. Like, brother, you just haven't made anything good. It's also a bad idea that you tried in the first place. Look, man, it didn't work. Move on. But stop trying to push the blame onto the way the press reacted to the bad movies. Anybody that watched them will say the same thing about them, that they just weren't good. Like, Kraven and Madam Web are 2 of the worst movies of the year. But anyway, though, the reason I'm talking about Tony is because it's a good insight into the people that lead these massive corporations and just how far from the public consciousness they are, where he is with a straight face saying that the reason Madam Web and Kraven are failing isn't because they're bad movies, because they're not. It's just because of the press. That's so delusional. They are just not good movies. Again, I don't expect Tony to come out here and eat a mouthful of ass on it, being like, yep, these movies are garbage. I just expect him to just be more honest about it and say, like, hey, looks like you guys weren't responding super positively to these films, so we're going to re-strategize this approach to this universe. Like, that's, like, you're acknowledging that people don't like them without making excuses for it, and you're talking about how you're going to go forward and hopefully learn from this failure. But in today's day and age, there is no such thing as a CEO that gets it. It's just like Ubisoft here, constantly doing the same shit and wondering why it's failing without ever taking a moment to see the root cause of what's causing the failure. That's exactly the street Tony is walking right now. The Ubisoft path. But with terrible, no Spider-Man movies that he's pumping out. I am curious to see what they plan to do going forward now, though. Honestly, they should just sell the rights. Like, they clearly cannot use it very well. I think it is about time they just fully throw in the towel and call it quits on it. But regardless, even if they do continue this path going forward, not going to bother me much because I like bad movies. But unfortunately, almost all of these haven't been fun bad. They've been waste of time bad, which is the worst kind. But I guess we'll see what happens next for Sony Pictures here in this universe they've built up. That's really about it. See ya.